Hey guys, it's Wave Theory. Just real quick before we get into this review. When I shot the review and then I came back and I listened to the audio, there was a really high-pitched squeal going on, and I don't know why that is. I have gotten a new microphone. It's a Sennheiser MK200. We'll see what it is here. I have it right here. Okay. Yeah, here it is. Sennheiser MK E400 and all that, using my GoPro Hero 10, and I know that the audio on this channel has not been great, and I'm trying to improve it with new stuff, but I am having a world of trouble getting everything to come together on the video and audio quality. So I'm shooting this on my phone to let you know that there might be a high-pitched squeal that I think is coming from this microphone. I don't know why. In the review coming up, I am working on it. If you guys have suggestions on how to improve all of that, please let me know, because I have been working really hard to improve the quality, and it's just becoming one problem after another. So when you watch this review, you might want to just use a phone speaker or something like that that's not going to squeal at you the whole time. So sorry about that, but into the review. Enjoy. Hello fellow audiophiles, I am Wave Theory, and I am back today to give you a review of another top-of-the-line tier headphone, and that is the final D8000 Pro, which lists for $4,300 US, which, yeah, that definitely puts it firmly in the territory of that top-of-the-line tier, along with those other 4,000 plus models, like the Focal Utopia, the Odyssey LCD5, the Susvara, the AB1266, and so forth. So we will talk about how this stacks up to those in the course of this review too. Alright, apologies for a couple of things. One, I have been a bit under the weather lately, so that has delayed this review by at least a couple of days. And it's still lingering in my voice again, so I apologize for not sounding 100% normal. I'm feeling a lot better today, but you'll still hear that. Also, if the video jumps around, it's because I will have to pause the recording because I have a coughing fit, and I will go back and edit that out. Okay, so please bear with me on that. Alright, but most of the listening that I did, well, really all of the critical listening that I did for this headphone was prior to my head getting all stuffed up. So that's what the report that you will get today. Okay. With that, also please remember to like and subscribe to my channel and do all of those things that you do to help support YouTube channels. Alright, so the D8000 Pro. Let's get back into what it is. So like I said, $4,300 US. It is a planar magnetic open back headphone. Now, when I saw pictures of this thing back, months ago, not really knowing what it is, like, I thought it was a dynamic driver headphone, just by the way it looks. I mean, it's completely round, it's not oval shaped, it's nothing like that you often see with planar magnetics. It has the look of a dynamic, but it's not. It uses a circular planar driver in there that Final has done something they call an air film in there with the driver, which they claim helps with bass and bass reproduction. And there might be something to that, and we'll get to that here in just a moment. Okay, but other than that, let's just talk a little bit more about build. Like, we have I think it's a spring steel headband here with, some decent padding and all of that. It has a very unique, like, system right here where we have just a friction based head size sliding adjustment there that's just really smooth. I never had any trouble with this like not staying in place, even though it feels really smooth. And then we have this like ball joint kind of a thing where the cup attaches so that it swivels around here. Now I have a comment to make about that ball joint, which I will film separately and then edit in here. So let's take a look at that for a moment. Using my phone for this, so I'm not exactly sure how it's going to turn out, but what I'm trying to show you here is down inside there, you kind of see that liquidy sheen of lubricant so that the cup can swivel around that joint right there. Now, It's not a problem, and like I have small hands and I can't even get my fingers down in there to touch it, so I don't think it's ever going to be an issue for anyone. It's just odd to see that kind of a thing exposed on a top-of-the-line headphone. That's all. It's really not a deal breaker or anything like that, just a build quirk that I thought would be interesting to share. Alright, back from that. So again, that lubrication in there, like you could tell it's lubricant because I did stick like a toothpick down there and some like fluidy stuff did come up on that. So like it's not just an optical illusion, like it's an actual lubricant down there. It's just, again, not a deal breaker, just an odd thing to see. Other than that, like aesthetically, we just have this very industrial looking thing that, I mean, I think overall looks nice. Now, as far as comfort goes, the only issue that I had with comfort is that at times I think the clamp can be a little bit hard. Now, it does fit on the head well and securely. You know, shake it around a little bit, it stays in place pretty well. Sometimes, like down here on the lower jaw, I think it clamps just a little bit hard at times. Now, that could be, like, I don't know how old this unit is. This was loaned to me by the same friend of the channel who loans basically all of the high-end stuff that I have reviewed. And all that. So maybe that gets better in time. Maybe that was just a sensitivity because I was about to get sick. I don't know. But even now I can feel that there's a fair amount of pressure on my head. Like right here, just under there where that pad is. So that's something to keep in mind, that some users might find that to be a problem. Alright, other than that, the cable entry on this is a dual 3.5 millimeter with these jacks right here. Now, they are still a proprietary 3.5 millimeter. So here is one of the two stock cables it comes with. This is the long one. Okay, it's got a fair amount of memory to it. Like this one is about 3 meters long. It comes with a shorter black one that is about half this length. All that. Didn't think either one was ergonomically great. This one is very thick. It seems high quality, but again, I found it a bit cumbersome to use. Now back to the connector. We see on here, I hope this shows up well, that we have these like little wing-like flanges in here, so that when you actually plug this in, you push it in and then you twist to lock these in place. So the openings on these jacks are not super friendly for aftermarket cables that do not use this proprietary locking mechanism. Now, I know that locking in place cables is fairly common amongst headphones, like most mini XLRs, like from Audizies and ZMFs and that sort of thing. They lock in place. Okay, so it's not rare or unheard of. In general, I don't really understand why they need to lock in place. Like, to me, one of the advantages to having removable cabling, beyond the fact that you can put your own desired cable on it, is that if you move around just wrong and the cable gets snagged on something, it just pulls out instead of, you know, really jerking your head down or risking breaking something. Like, just the thing just breaks away at the plug. But whatever. Now, both of the stock cables that came with this one are single-ended. So, and like most of the amps that are, or not most, but the amp, my Vioelectric HPA V281, which I primarily use to power this, you know, again, it's a balanced amplifier. So, I had to find a really thin 3.5 millimeter cabling to stick in there to use balanced, and the only one that I could find that would fit would be the cable that came with my HiFiMan HE6SE V2. So that cable fit, but it's one of those, you know, I call them the catheter cables from HiFiMan, because they're coated in that medical tubing, which is just feels even ickier and weirder than the stuff on this final cable. But that worked and allowed me to plug these in to my V281 and run balanced, which was helpful because you get more power from the balanced output on most amps that have that are of balanced design, and that made a difference to the performance. So at least I got to do that. But keep in mind that you're probably not going to want to use these cables for ergonomic reasons, but you know, we have a proprietary cabling system again. and that's going to make it harder to find aftermarket cables to use with this thing. Okay. I just mentioned the amp that I used most. Like I also tried this on my Cord Hugo 2, and again the HPA V281 was the primary amp that I used to drive this, and then the DACs that I used to test it other than the Hugo 2 would be my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC, which is fed by a Singer SU2 USB bridge. And then also I have a Matrix Audio X Saber 3 Pro DAC and streamer in on loan from Apos, which I'm working on a review for, and so I used that with these two. Alright, now to drive these, they're not super hard to drive. They have a rated impedance of 60 ohms and a sensitivity. I've seen a couple of different numbers out there, but the more common one I've seen is 98 decibels per milliwatt, which means that it's fairly sensitive. So it's not overly hard to drive. However, it does need some current in the low end. I just said, like, I could tell when I went from a single-ended connection on my V281 to the balance connection, the bass woke up a little bit more. There's a little bit more low-end rumble, a little bit more punch, and a little bit more control in the low end. And conversely, like with my Hugo 2, it sounded pretty good overall. The Hugo 2 pushes it okay, but in that low end in particular, you could tell there just wasn't as much oomph there as from the balance connection on my V281. So, not the hardest things to drive ever, usable on some lower powered ones, but I think the bass wakes up a lot more when you give it a little bit more power. Okay, so let's get into the sound on this thing then. Now, sonically, when I first put this on and started listening to it, it struck me as, like, there are two ways that I could think about describing this headphone, at least initially, and that was, it is a more detailed Sennheiser HD800S with more bass and more, like, low-end physicality, or it's an OG Focal Clear with more detail and a bigger soundstage. As I've listened to more and more, like, it kind of depends on the situation as to whether I lean that it's a more detailed HD800S with more bass, or it's a more detailed Clear with bigger soundstage. Like, it just, I kind of go back and forth on one of those two. So, in some sense, if you're sitting at an HD800S or an original Focal Clear and you're looking to get into that top of the line, like 4K plus tier, this one might be one that's worth checking out because it has qualities that to me are very reminiscent of those two. Now, it is more resolving than either of those two. The resolution here is pretty good and I think worthy of the 4,000 plus tier. The imaging and the separation are also quite strong. It doesn't have a huge stage. Like in time, it wasn't as wide as the HD800S. It's certainly fairly large in its staging, and it still maintains a little bit of that bubble around the head feeling that comes with the Clear. So it's kind of like in between those two in terms of how it stages, but the imaging and the separation are also pretty strong, and I think, again, worthy of that, you know, $4,000 tier price in there. Tonally, I think there are a couple of issues, I think, with the tonality. One is there is a little bit of a peak in like the 1 to 1.5 kilohertz range. I don't want to say peak. It's not like a sharp peak, but there's a little bit of an elevation in that range and then a dip on either side of it, which does affect the vocal tonality a little bit. Like, it's not horrible, but my ears do pick up some more shout and honk from this headphone than they have from most 4,000 plus headphones. Okay, to me, it's not as offensive in that way as most of the Abyss headphones that I've heard, because Abyss has really struggled with that, in my opinion. It's more controlled than the Odyssey Carbon Electrostat, in my opinion, but it's still there. Sometimes with some recordings, my ears were able to adjust to that and not really notice it, but then other times, not so much. And then also, if you're going to use this to watch anything or listen to anything with just spoken word, like if you're going to use this for YouTube videos or movie watching or anything like that, which I know some people use headphones for, like to me, the vocal presentation there was very forward and had that tonal quality that you often hear at your Cinemaplex, where the mid-range is bumped way up supposedly to enhance dialogue clarity, but it makes it sound like everyone is talking through a paper towel tube. It does not sound that bad with music, but with just spoken words, I noticed that a lot. Okay. The other issue with the tonality is up around like the 4.5 to 5-ish kilohertz range. There's, again, I don't really want to call it a peak, but there's somewhat of an elevation with a dip on each side right there where the treble can be a little bit thin and a little bit shimmery sounding. And there was some sibilance with a lot of recordings. Now, some will say that, you know, if you have a bad recording, you're going to get sibilance anyway, and I agree with that. But I was hearing sibilance injected on some material with this one that I had not heard through, say, Susvara or Utopia, or some others up in that range, LCD5, that sort of thing. So tonally, a couple of quirks there. The overall signature, though, is, I want to say it's a neutral bright, because as I said, I compared it like sonically to the HD800S and the Clear OG there initially, and those I would both classify as neutral bright signatures. And so I think that that is still true here. Not hugely, but it's noticeable. So it's still more neutral than it is not, but if I had to describe it, I would lean towards a neutral bright overall presentation here. Now, the bass on this thing, the low end, is actually very good. Like, I kid you not, the D8000 Pro meaningfully challenges the AB1266, okay, and all of that in terms of bass quality. The bass detail, the pitch definition, the articulation, the bass resolution, all of those things is really, really strong on this. That is a standout feature of this headphone, is that from a qualitative aspect, the bass sounds phenomenal. This is probably as close to a real bass guitar sound as I have gotten from a headphone, save potentially the Abyss headphones that are out there. There's also some pretty good slam to the bass, some physicality. Not quite Focal Utopia level, not quite Odyssey LCD5 level on that, but also nothing to sneeze at. Okay, what you're not going to get is the bass presence that comes with an Abyss here. Like, the bass is not elevated. It is very well extended. It reaches way down deep. There's a noticeable rumble here. It's just not elevated or as aggressive or as in your face in its bass presentation as the Abyss line is. So that really is a standout feature here. Okay, and really I would say probably its best sonic trait. So to me, other than those qualitative aspects of the bass presentation being outstanding, everything else is just kind of right where it needs to be, with a couple of minor tonal quirks that for most people are not going to be deal breakers, but for me are noticeable and distracting at times. So add that all up, and I guess where I would place this one on in comparison to all of the other $4,000+ models that I have reviewed on this channel, which I will link to below. In my personal ranking, in terms of preference, I would put this right behind LCD5. So my personal preferences up there in that top of the line tier there, in terms of more standard headphone models, would be Susvara and Utopia. If I could pick two to be complements to each other, it would be those two. Susvara and Utopia are the ones that I would go with. If I needed one that could do both of the jobs that Utopia and Susvara do pretty well, it would be LCD5. But I would slot this one in right behind LCD5 there. I think its overall quality and presentation, it's more complete, more fully fleshed out than AB1266 or any of the Diana series Okay, it's still definitely way ahead of Meze Elite. For my preferences and the way my ears work, it's definitely better than the RAL SR1A. Not in terms of staging or of detail, but just in terms of just like a more full, fleshed out presentation sonically and all of that. So, yeah, that's where we're at with this one. So I mostly enjoyed it. There are a couple of tonal issues that I think keep it from being outstanding in the timbre. And for me, those are why I am ranking it behind those that I just mentioned. So, like, I still like the quality of the bass, the staging, and the imaging and separation, and the detail retrieval and all that are where they need to be. It's just those couple tonal quirks which mess up the timbre for me a little bit. A little too often, I think, for my preferences on that. But again, I think a lot of people will be a-okay with its timbre and tonality in those two areas. All right, so that is my review of the final D8000 Pro Edition. I have some other videos coming up. I mentioned that X-Saber 3 DAC from Matrix Audio that's coming up. I have a ZMF Verite Closed coming up for review, and I've got a smattering of other things coming in. So I know content has been slow lately, but I mean, I am also a physics professor, and it's April, so that's always crunch time in the school year for me. So it has been busy, and then of course I got sick. So sorry about that, but we are back. Final D8000 Pro, pretty solid entry into the $4,000+ market. So if you're up in there and you like the sound that you get from HD800S or Focal Clear OG, and you like quality of bass but don't really like a huge amount of bass presence, then I think this one is on your list to check out. So I am Wave Theory, and as always, thanks for watching and enjoy the music.